Maps do much more than point out places. They tell the story of the world around us.
We live on a planet with a great variety of people and places, so there are many kinds of maps that tell many stories.
Maps tell us about the countries we live in,
The kind of land we live on,
the weather we experience,
what we do with our lives.
and for many of us, maps show where our families came from and where relatives and friends now live.
As we learn about the world around us through travel and study, maps and globes have many uses. For instance, how can you determine how far away your favorite city is?
You can use a map to determine the distance to your favorite city, or even foreign country, where perhaps a relative lives. In this program, we'll discuss different uses for globes and maps, as we learn first about the scale of maps. Then, take a look at how to use symbols and keys, before finally talking about special purpose maps. To start then, let's discuss the use of scale on maps. Maps and globes show us where places are located on our planet, but obviously they can't show us the actual size of those places. So map makers show size and distances in a few inches or feet, according to a scale of distance. When you select a place to visit, it helps to know how far away that destination is, whether it's the next town or city, or perhaps several states away. Then, when you know the distance to your destination, you can figure out travel time. Maps and globes that are precisely drawn can help you determine distance. Guesswork or an inaccurate map will create problems. On a map, a certain space stands for a greater actual distance on Earth. For instance, let's say you plan a bicycle trip to visit a friend. On this rough neighborhood map, notice that 1 inch equals a certain distance. How much distance does 1 inch equal here?
Here, 1 inch equals 2 miles. These figures are the scale for this map. They tell us what the real distance is that a certain space stands for on the map. To determine the distance between your home and your friend's house, you use a ruler to measure between the 2 points. According to the ruler placed on this map, how many miles away is your friend's house? The distance between the 2 points is 4 miles. This is because the ruler measures 2 inches, and according to the scale, 1 inch equals 2 miles. For different maps, there are different scales. Obviously, a map for hiking will probably cover less area than a road map for driving. And some maps may be similar, but different in size. So a measurement like 1 inch will stand for different distances, like this map of the United States, where 1 inch stands for 2,000 miles. Now, here's another slightly larger map of the U.S. According to the scale on this map, 1 inch equals 1,500 miles. And here's a still larger map of the U.S. According to the scale, how much does 1 inch equal here?
According to the scale on this map, 1 inch stands for 1,000 miles. As we can see here, 1 inch represents a greater distance on a small map than on a larger map. So maps can show an area on Earth with little detail or great detail. If a map like this doesn't show much detail, we call it a small-scale map. But if a map shows a great deal of detail, we call it a large-scale map, like this one. Scales of distance can be shown in feet, yards, or miles. So scales of distance give us an idea of a map or globe's relation to reality. By accurately using scales, we can avoid the problems of early explorers with bad maps, like Christopher Columbus, who, when he reached islands off North America, thought he was near the continent of Asia. While maps and globes show land, water, and distances, they can also show many other things. Symbols are special marks on maps and globes that stand for real things. These symbols can represent places, landmarks, industries, or various other things. Colors and shadings also have meaning, standing for such features as weather conditions, or landforms, which, like this map, may designate highlands or lowlands. Here are some typical symbols for a state map in the United States. A key is used to explain the meaning of symbols on a map. For example, here's a town map with several highways, structures, and other physical features. And here is a map key to explain the symbols. By checking the key, we see that this symbol represents the town hall, and this symbol stands for a factory, and this symbol for a river. What does this symbol represent?
This symbol stands for a park, and as we can see, there are 2 parks on this map. On maps, distance scale is also a type of key. For various kinds of maps, there are different keys to explain the different symbols. Symbols and keys are easy to use and make it possible for us to get more information from maps and globes. There are many special purpose maps. And since maps tell the story of the world around us, there are many different kinds of maps that tell many stories. Maps, like this population map, allow us to see information quickly. Because maps are visual, they convey general information faster and better than pages of words or complex tables. Many special maps are called thematic maps because they use geography to provide information on a theme or subject that people need to know. Political maps are probably the maps we're most familiar with. These are the maps we often use in locating cities, states, or nations. Our planet is split into huge land masses we call continents. These continents are further divided into nations or countries. Countries are separated by boundaries, but they are also set apart by different governments or political systems. And countries have different cultures or ways of life, and often they have different languages. Political maps keep changing because the world keeps changing. About 50 years ago, there were 82 countries in the world. Now, there are more than twice that number. Why do you think these new countries were formed?
Often, new countries are formed when people want independence or freedom from past rulers. The breakup of the Soviet Union, for example, created new countries. On a political map, the line separating one country from another is called a border. These borders sometimes follow natural land features, such as a mountain range or a river, like the Rio Grande River that separates the U.S. and Mexico. Where people or governments are in conflict, borders can be heavily defended. Where do you think the world's longest undefended border is?
The world's longest undefended border runs between the U.S. and Canada and is nearly 4,000 miles in length. Political maps, then, show the outline and divisions of nations and then smaller sections within those nations. For example, Here's a map of the U.S. divided into states. Now, here's a map of the state of Nebraska, divided into counties. And here's a typical map of a city in Nebraska, Lincoln. Similar divisions are found in most nations. Here, for instance, we have a map of Ireland, which is divided into counties. While we're all familiar with the borders and divisions of political maps, the maps we probably use most are road maps. Road maps show not only the towns and cities in an area, but the different roads connecting them. You've probably used a road map if you've taken a trip by car. Here's a road map for part of the state of Kansas. The map key tells what the symbols on the map mean. If you're driving in Kansas from Wichita to Newton, what number highway would you take?
Your fastest route would be 135 from Wichita to Newton. Using a road map, you can see different ways of going from place to place. For example, what are the two ways of going from Wichita to El Dorado in Kansas?
To drive from Wichita to El Dorado, you can go northeast on Route 35, or you can go east on Route 96, then north on Route 77. You can determine distance with a road map by adding up distance figures shown on the map, or using the distance scale and measuring the distance. With a road map, you can easily plan trips and make your travel easier and more enjoyable.
We often see weather maps in newspapers and on television. These special maps serve as a forecast, telling us what the weather will be like for the next several days. Temperature and precipitation are important factors in the weather. Temperature means how hot or cold it is, while precipitation on the map means how much rain or snow falls. Weather maps also show wind direction and air pressure systems. Generally, low pressure, indicated by L, means stormy weather, and high pressure, H, means clear weather. All weather on Earth moves from west to east, riding on high-altitude, high-speed jet streams. Climate maps, like this one of the world, show us the average condition of the weather over a period of years. Here, we see differences and similarities in the climate around the world, with such conditions as dry, mild, or hot and rainy. Notice the continent of Africa on this map. What are the two main climate conditions of this continent?
As we see here, the main climate conditions of Africa are dry and hot and rainy. Vegetation maps are related to climate maps because they show the natural plant growth in a particular area. This map of South America, for example, shows where vegetation like rainforests or grasslands is found. Such vegetation depends on an area's climate. Land use maps tell us how people make use of their land. In this map of South America, we can see where the main areas of farming and manufacturing are located. Maps can show the distribution of people in various areas around the world. In population maps like this one of the U.S., some places have a high population density, where people live very close to one another. In other places, there may be low population density, where people live far from one another. In the United States, where do you think the high-density places are located?
Cities are the places with high-density population, not only in the U.S., but around the world. Indeed, about half the world's population now lives in cities. In this world population map, we can see where people are clustered around cities. What nation do you think has the largest population in the world?
China is the nation with the largest population. People in different places use their land to produce different things. This is shown in product maps. This product map of South America shows the location of crop areas, industrial production, and resources like copper and iron ore.
Another kind of map is the physical relief map that shows the topography or physical surface of parts of our planet. These surface features often include the landforms of plains, plateaus, hills, and mountains. This physical relief map of Brazil indicates the lowlands and highlands of the country. Scientists describe lowlands as lands up to 500 feet above sea level. People living in different parts of the world use their land in different ways and produce different things. Using these products, nations trade with each other to get what they need. Trade and travel maps like this show us the most heavily used trade and travel routes on the water. Similar maps are available for different parts of the world for other forms of transportation. Sometimes we can use two special maps together, and by comparing them, get more information. For instance, here's a map of the U.S. with various states designated. Now here's a climate map indicating weather conditions for the U.S. Compare the two maps. According to these maps, what are the general weather conditions in Colorado?
Comparing the two maps, we can see that Colorado is in a part of the nation that generally experiences cool summers and dry, cold winters.
So, there are many maps providing information on topics that affect our lives, like weather, climate, population, travel, and various other subjects.
In this program, we've learned about the scale of maps,
discussed how to use symbols and keys,
and taken a look at some of the special purpose maps that are available.
As we've seen, maps and globes tell us many stories about the world by providing special, useful information about places and people.